Good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to Keele University, the Institute for Liberal Arts and Sciences. My name is David Amigoni, and I'm director of the and now you can hear me as well. And I'm director of the Institute for Social Inclusion here at Keele. Briefly, for those of you who may be new to these events, the Institute for Liberal Arts and Sciences, or ILAS, promotes interdisciplinary education and research both at Keele and beyond, and we're certainly going beyond our immediate locale tonight in looking at the work that Mariangela brings to us. More information is available on the ILAS website, where you can also see videos of previous Global Challenges lectures. So I'm really delighted this evening to introduce this evening's Global Challenges lecturer, and that is Professor Mariangela Palladino. And Mariangela is going to be talking about migration in the Maghreb, an interdisciplinary approach, subtitle MADAR's Motley. And I like the idea of the motley, so looking forward to listening to that. It is a real pleasure as a colleague who's worked with Mariangela since 2009, I think. 13, is it really? Okay, it feels longer. It feels longer in a good way. So it feels longer in a good way. Mariangela has worked at Keele since 2013, and I was really pleased to be on her, kind of appointment panel actually, and so she's been a fantastic colleague to work with, to become Professor of Post-Colonial and Cultural Studies, and now Dean of Research in the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at Keele University. Her fields of expertise include post-colonial studies, migration and displacement, participatory methods, and research ethics and African literatures, including African American literatures, and her first monograph was on the ethics of that great African American writer, Toni Morrison. She's currently principal investigator of the UKRI-funded project, the Maghreb Action on Displacement and Rights. Mariangela holds degrees from the Università degli Studi di Napoli l'Orientale from Italy and the University of Strathclyde in the UK. Prior to joining Keele, Mariangela has held teaching and research positions in the UK at the Universities of Glasgow and Edinburgh, and in Portugal at the University of Coimbra. It's really important, I think, to say something about the remarkable kind of personal qualities that Mariangela brings to her work. Her work is about the ethics around migration and displacement. She published, as I've said, on Toni Morrison and the ethics of her fiction. And that kind of theme of ethics is something I think that runs deeply through her career as a researcher and scholar, but also in the way she conducts herself as a research leader. And she is an immensely distinguished research leader. And I'm very, very pleased to be part of the faculty that she organises as Dean of Research. She is also, and you can probably sense this from the range of international locations that she's worked in, she is also a linguist of real distinction. In addition to her native Italian, she is, of course, fluent in English, German, French, with also knowledge of Portuguese. So she is a really distinguished scholar. Mariangela will be happy to take some questions at the end of the lecture, and for those of you working online, there's an opportunity to engage through the Q&A portal on the right-hand side of the screen, as I say, for those of you who are online, and a very warm welcome to all of those of you who are joining us in that mode. So, without any further comment, I'm going to welcome Mariangela to the podium. Mariangela.
Thank you, David, for such a really warm and slightly embarrassing introduction. Thank you also to ILAS for the opportunity to present tonight my work. I have to say that your invitation landed in my inbox over a year ago, and I said to you, I have no data. I can't accept this. I can't present something without data. So once I had data, because of that ethics thing that David mentioned, I felt like I had to tell them, I do have data now. So thank you for bearing with me. Thanks also to the colleagues in AV and to the student ambassadors and caterers who are enabling this function tonight. As David said, I'm going to talk about migration in the Maghreb tonight. And MADAR's motley is a little bit of a pun here, and you'll see throughout. I'll talk about MADAR, which is Maghreb Action on Displacement and Rights. In Arabic, the word means path. MADAR is an interdisciplinary project which aims to improve the humanitarian protection of vulnerable, displaced people in the Maghreb region, which is in North Africa. A few details about the project. It's a £2 million project funded by the prestigious Global Challenges Research Fund, which is a dedicated fund by the UK government, research and innovation. And it responds really to the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office needs for data around aid and development. MADAR was one of 11 projects awarded in the UK. Just to give you a sense of scale about MADAR, we have 4 academic institutions in the UK, Manchester, Edinburgh, Liverpool, and Kiel as lead, and I am principal investigator for MADAR. 3 academic institutions and 2 NGOs in the Maghreb. Our team includes 20 people, the core team. We have senior and early career researchers, support staff, practitioners, activists, NGO workers, but also PSS staff that have oversight and coordination, communication and finance team. We also have a number of languages in MADAR, and our official language is French. MADAR also has its own policies on ethics, risks, safeguarding, and equality, diversity, and inclusion. Not just because we want to add extra work, because the kind of policies that we have here in the university or in the UK would not fit for the North African context. So we had to design, co-design together context-specific policies. What does MADAR do? MADAR aims to generate an evidence based on humanitarian protection for people affected by displacement in south-south displacement in the Maghreb. It offers a bottom-up, solution-focused approach to the layered and multiple protection risks associated with displacement in the Maghreb. It aligns with the Sustainable Development Goal 16 to promote peaceful and inclusive societies. Where does MADAR come from? Its intellectual genesis is important here, and it's a very personal one to me, and David has somewhat already gestured toward that. It grows and it grew from long-standing research projects that I led and co-led over the years about migration and vulnerability in Morocco, but also from fruitful relationships established with scholars, civil society actors, NGOs, practitioners, activists, and artists over the years. We all shared a commitment for the rigorous examination of migration, grounded in interdisciplinary and cross-sector approach, and also a belief that such an approach can actually have a radical potential. But this is not always without challenges, and I'll touch on that later. But we all found a common ground around a desire to foster change and solution to the problem studied. One such research project was Arts for Advocacy. Okay. The main challenge that MADAR tackles is actual, as I said, displacement as a global challenge, especially in North Africa. And our focus is vulnerabilities. We want to contribute to reducing risks and improving protection for displaced people in the Maghreb, to shape and influence national and regional policies that facilitate protection for displaced people. I've been saying Maghreb a lot, and I just wanted to kind of give a sense of what the Maghreb is. So this is a global challenge that we are addressing, but this is a sense for you in some terms of scale of what the Maghreb means and why it's so important in terms of displacement. It is a key nexus in migration patterns between Africa and the Middle East, and Europe, of course. The Maghreb is at the heart of a really fragile geopolitical context, inhabited by a growing population of vulnerable displaced people. Round about 800,000 refugees and asylum seekers are in the wider North Africa sub-region, and this excluding internally displaced people. Again, just a little bit of data. This is official data, this is not our data, this is from the UNHCR. But the Maghreb is conceived often in terms of emigration. People come from North Africa. But in fact, it is a key region of transit and also becomes a destination country for a lot of sub-Saharan migrants that seek to move up. It hosts numbers of displaced people with inadequate protection measures. So the rise in the number of displaced people traversing the Maghreb is affected by conflict and endemic poverty in the Sahara-Sahel, so in Algeria-Mali border, but also across the wider Middle East and North Africa, the MENA region, Libya, Syria, Yemen, and across sub-Saharan Africa. So it's a very significant hub. This is a quick snapshot of the countries we work on. We work in Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia, and the MADAR team that I lead is spread across these three countries. Morocco is a crossroad for different forms of migration: migrant workers, foreign students, transit migrants. It hosts about over 100,000 migrants between asylum seekers and refugees. In Algeria, illegal migration is a punishable offense since 2009, but Algeria lacks protection measures for refugees and displaced people, and does not yet have any regulatory provisions for the management of migrants. So the measures in place currently only entail deportation of a large number of people, particularly sub-Saharan migrants, to the Algerian entry border. Effectively, this means they are just deported in the desert. Tunisia has now become a common destination and transit as well as departure country, but it plays a really key role and has a strategic position in North Africa. Because of its geographical position, the country shapes the dynamics and the debates around migration between Europe and Africa. It's a first point of arrival for thousands of people fleeing conflict in Libya, Sudan, and Eritrea, among other key clandestine routes to Europe via the Mediterranean Sea, and is the first port of call for people to get into Italy. There is no common agreement on data of how many displaced people there are in Tunisia, but there's an estimate number of 75,000 at present. So with this background, which I thought it was useful to just explain the context, where's MADAR coming from and where we operate, just why MADAR is different, what do we do differently. This is the first research project that adopts a regional approach to migration in this region. The Maghreb is a territory of strategic interest for the UK and for Europe, essentially because it supports Europe in doing the dirty work for curbing migration, but also address the movement of forced migrants across the Sahara and the Mediterranean. The UK is a key player in the region, mainly for kind of ODA assistance, but also trade around hydrocarbons, and of course for tackling terrorism. Our work is interdisciplinary. So far, existing knowledge bases and all the data that's out there, the data sources, are limited to a single discipline, and often a single methodological approach and by country focus. And such isolated disciplinary responses have been inadequate to tackle displacement at complex levels like there is in the Maghreb. So MADAR is innovative and transformative through its very multidisciplinary approach and team and through its regional focus. But also because we have a cross-sector team. So we work across academia, NGOs, with practitioners, with artists, with policymakers at international level. And this is transformative because it enables the work to be grounded and rooted into the real world. Now, I said a lot of things about numbers and sort of regional representation of what MADAR is, but I just wanted you to kind of have a sense of who my team is and what we do. And here is a little mashup of MADAR. This is time in COVID. These are interviews, events, rehearsal for performance, a meeting in Kiel Hall where I'm seen chatting, field sites, a meeting in Tunisia before the reprisal, more field work, I think somewhere in Morocco. We are in Tunisia. Here, this is a whole meeting in Morocco. One of our participants, again, I'm seen chatting with a cup of tea. I promise I don't just do that. More interviews for one of our projects. These are our early career colleagues at Kiel Hall. This is Algeria. More from field work and performances. And this is our team with an iconic pose in Liverpool. I just wanted you to see, part of who we are and what we do, very briefly. So I said that MADAR is solution-focused. I don't expect you to read all of this, but I wanted to give you a sense when we kind of developed and devised MADAR, what it actually means. So there are challenges across the Maghreb relating to displacement and vulnerabilities, and our work is based on designing solutions. So for a lack of data, we facilitate interdisciplinary research collaboration to generate new data, new knowledge. We foster cross-sector partnership in the Maghreb and the MENA region, but also where there are there's inadequate access to healthcare, education, and employment. We identify measures to overcome these barriers, to allow displaced people to access their services. Where there is ineffectual and lack of legislation and policies to ensure the protection of vulnerable people, we seek to inform policies, legislation, and practices, and promote effective institutional framework. How do we do that? There are three key, I would say, research questions, but this sounds really technical, kind of as if I was writing a grant, so I'll step back. There are three sort of key areas of intervention that we have. And one is addressing the after effect of harm, where harm has already happened. And so the immediate protection needs of displaced people and how they are addressed. Reducing risk exposure and facilitating the protection of displaced people. And also promoting change by identifying local, national, and regional protection measures for vulnerable people in the Maghreb. We have already preliminary findings from the project, which started in 2020 and will end in 2025. And MADAR, it's not only a project, it's also a network, because we have a portfolio of around £800,000 to commission research externally. So while we have a core team of 20 people, we also have other teams that are funded by MADAR, and they produce more research. And we've commissioned so far 5 large grants and 6 work packages internationally. We have already some very highly impactful and solution-focused findings. And today I will talk about 2 of these projects, where there is emerging data, some of it sort of unsettling data, uncomfortable data, nonetheless data that needs to be shared. And the projects are from Morocco and Algeria. The first case study, assessment of access to reproductive health rights for sub-Saharan migrant women in Oran and Béchar. And I'm glad to see colleagues from the Faculty of Medicines around in the room. So the study focused on sub-Saharan female migrant access to reproductive health rights in Oran. That's in Algeria, and Oran is a coastal city considered as one of the strategic migration hubs toward Europe. And then Béchar, as the other location, is on the other end, and it's a getaway, an entry point for sub-Saharan migrants into Algeria. So the study aimed to address the access of women or migrant women to healthcare, but also to empower civil society actors to enhance their capacity in delivering in enabling that access, but also shaping the practices for healthcare professionals. Why is this study significant? So the study is significant in scope, scale, and of course, in impact. It utilizes qualitative as well as quantitative methods. Just to give you a sense of the size, we used mixed research methods to engage with 500 migrant women. According to UNHCR, female sub-Saharan migrants are really a real minority in the migrant population. So this gives you a sense of the significance of our sample size with 500 migrant women in our study. Access. This is a really politically sensitive and controversial subject in immigration, especially in Algeria. So it was very crucial to provide, to gain access. It was difficult, but also to provide safeguarding for the women we worked with, because they are constant risk of deportation. So this involved taking measures to protect them from that. And the topic, healthcare and reproductive health, is a sensitive topic, especially in a kind of multicultural, multilingual context, and especially when involving vulnerable women. So it was challenging to engage migrant women in discussing their reproductive health. The study involved health practitioners like nurses, psychiatrists, also anthropologists, demographers, NGO workers, and also some artists. I want to give you a sense of the finding now from this study. And I've divided the findings in kind of three key, I suppose, groups. There's much more, there's a lot more, but this was just, as I said, to give you a dive in and out. One is on the journey. Women undertaking migratory journeys are significantly exposed to health risks due to the challenging condition they experience. This also significantly affects their reproductive health. The length of the journey can vary from 1 month to 5 months. And the journey is riddled with obstacles that takes place in terrible conditions, hunger, exhaustion, insecurity, rapes, all forms of sexual violence, assaults, lack of hygiene, and more. Migrant women sometimes have to resort to sex work in order to continue their journey. One of our participants said, "Along the way, I have suffered. We are assaulted. Myself, I have been raped. If you refuse, you are beaten. They threatened to keep the child, to deport them to Cameroon. Like the other women, I was undernourished, abused. I cry all the time." She's Cameroonian, 31-year-old. Destitution is another key element in the data that emerged. 69% of women interviewed stated that they slept on the street. This is only in Béchar. Only 3% of the women have access to work. 87% of female migrants have no resources to live. One of the other respondents, she's only 28 years old. At first, I found myself on the street. I spent nights outside. I slept in the garden. I had to give in to the advances he made to me. Yes, I had no choice. He told me that he would find me a roof. He sexually abused me. Access to health. The study highlighted significant obstacles for migrant women in accessing safe public health care. This enhances their vulnerability. So the survey showed that among the barriers are financial, of course, but also discrimination and racism, which some caregivers associate migrant women with AIDS. I fell ill almost 2 months ago. I had pain in my lower abdomen, severe pain. I went to the hospital with my Cameroonian sister, but I was not able to see the doctor. Everyone sends me elsewhere to see another hospital service. Congolese woman, 35-year-old. I gave birth at the Santen clinic. There was a woman who asked me to get out of bed, to put me on the floor, so she could put her Arab sister there. That's racism. I tell her that I don't leave the bed. There's too much racism here. That's all there is. Cameroonian woman, 31 years old. Female sub-Saharan migrants are more exposed to prostitution within exploitative networks, as well as rape. And this significantly enhances, again, their vulnerability. Only 15% of them admitted recourse to abortion to interrupt a pregnancy. 3 women out of the 10 we interviewed had been victim of sexual violence. Of the 200 women who declared having had abortion, 15 had recourse to an induced abortion, 15%. I had a forced sexual relationship during the trip. It's a child of rape. It's easy to say, hey, I'm going to have an abortion and get rid of the baby. But in reality, it's in fact getting rid of a forced sexual relationship. So this data requires more time, more thought, more depth, and which I can't give today, and warrants for more attention. But it gives you a sense, at least of these three strands, that in each of the three strands you can see there's always violence. There's always violence at every stage. And the vulnerability is multi-layered. So stepping back now, I want to kind of look at the next step for this project, this specific project on Algeria, and the kind of long-term impact. So the team is designing an advocacy plan with national and international stakeholders, a kind of roadmap on what to do next, raise awareness about the challenges faced by female migrants and drive change, to work with the ministry in Algeria, Ministry of Health, to ensure their active participation and contribution to the dialogue. Also to empower women victims of traffic to file complaints and seeking justice, and facilitating access to income-generating activities. So, as you can see, these are some of the next steps and some of the recommendations, but also, hence, the need for a cross-sector approach to this kind of work. We move on to another country, and that's Morocco, and the case study is called Boza. In Morocco, like in other countries across North Africa, migration is used by government to pressure Europe, because, as I said, they do a lot of the curbing of irregular migrants, but also as a tool for Morocco to play a big role in the African Union. In this geopolitical gamble, hundreds of thousands of migrants see their rights violated and denied. They are deported, humiliated, and they live their lives mainly in transit, because Morocco is significantly host migrants in transit who are there often for years, where transit becomes, in fact, a status. It is within this context that Boza was conceived. It's a short documentary. It's the story of Barn, Joël, and Abdou, and three men who leave their respective countries, pursuing a dignified life. On the road, they realize that the European El Dorado dream was not what they thought. So Boza is about stereotype, inhuman treatment, criminalization of migration, deportation, friendship, solidarity, and hope. Boza tells the story, the real-life story of these three men, but also aims to increase awareness about the challenges linked to migration and forced displacement. The team chose a documentary as a genre to engage with the Moroccan population, where there is a high level of illiteracy. And a documentary also is a medium that's easy to penetrate national and international film festivals to amplify the debates on migration. Ultimately, Boza aims to shift narrative on how media and official discourses represent migration and forced displacement. I'll say a couple of words about Boza. This is really significant because it's about lived experience. It's the kind of things you can't get from a questionnaire. It'll never come out. Boza is a term used among sub-Saharan migrants, and they refer to Boza for the act of crossing into Europe. So, especially via the sea route. So, through the Mediterranean Sea, into the Spanish mainland, or via the Atlantic Ocean into the Canary Island. Boza is a word to say victory. Boza means I've made it. I Boza. Boza is part of a wider vocabulary, a rich vocabulary, which is specific to a population of transient migrants, mainly sub-Saharans. And it's part of their code. It's also a way to protect themselves from the authorities. They have lots of words like this. with my team, we are also developing a paper exactly on language, and it's currently on the revision stage. So watch this space. The BOSA project entailed filming the daily life inside an informal camp set up by migrants in the forest. So we're talking about the north of Morocco, where migrants seek to entry into Europe. And these are transit camps. They are called tranquilos. There's nothing tranquil about these camps, but they're called tranquilos. And again, it's part of their own vocabulary. They're really impenetrable sites, quite dangerous field sites. They are informal, makeshift settlement not far from the coast where migrants seek entry before attempting to cross the sea route, but also there's also a land border with the enclaves of Ceuta and Melilla. So we needed people to get into these tranquilos. And let's not go into the kind of ethic application we needed to do for that. we will leave that aside. We needed reliable and frequent access to the tranquilos in this location. And the MADAR team reached out to people living inside the camps through our networks of NGOs and working on migration in Morocco. And we used participatory video making methods. So the team provided the 3 migrants, Barn, Joël, and Abdou, with 3 mobile phones, and they trained them to make reliable, good quality videos. The set of 3 migrants we worked with in BOSA were not only involved in filming the scenes from the tranquilos, they also captured their own aspiration, the dialogues, the chat, the difficulties they faced. They set up interview questions. They worked with the team on editing and montage until the end. They were part and parcel of the project. And now, without further ado, I'm going to rely on the brilliant team of AV to play the trailer. Is that right, Steve? Thank you.
Soldats, migrants, on tombe pas.
It took me about 12 years before my foot stepped on Morocco land.
Mon objectif de l'aventure, c'était de passer par Maroc pour aller en Europe. J'ai arrêté 4 fois. Quand ils tentent pour aller vers l'Europe aussi, quand les gardes-côtes les ont attrapés, ils vont au refoulement. Si je dis refoulement, c'est aux éloignements.
I lived in a tranquilo for 1 year. If we are there, we are all one because we are all making the same journey. So we make one family in a tranquilo. Regularly, before I was clandestine.
Thank you so much. But you will have seen from this slide that BOSA has also been entered for competition into international film festivals. The film provides really powerful insights into the living conditions of migrants, the actual circumstances of deportation at the hands of the authorities, the dynamics of solidarity at play, the effects of geopolitical games played on the backs of vulnerable population, but also the challenges faced by the migrants themselves on the ground. So you could see from the brief trailer what a tranquilo is, how do they live, how do they prepare for BOSA. Sometimes they call it l'attaque. So in real language, which kind of has some military implications. The BOSA project places Barn, Joël, and Abdou at the heart of policy-shaping discussions about migration and vulnerability. Through BOSA and other projects carried out as part of the network, we strive to analyze and demonstrate the gap between government's discourse about migration and the reality on the ground. We use different techniques and representational strategies to inform the wider public, but also to shape wider debates academically, but also in terms of policy. and practices, and also to hold governments to account for adopting urgent measures that need to be taken. This is crucial to provide protection and a dignified life for migrants based in Morocco or in transit. We need measures and legislation complying with human rights and international instruments signed and ratified by Morocco, but also by the other countries involved. Now, this is the end of the case studies that I wanted to show you in Algeria and Morocco, and I just have a kind of concluding, let's say, parenthesis about MADAR and its impact where we are at the moment. So our work is making a significant impact at societal level, nationally and internationally, in terms of awareness raising. The founding allow access to wider audiences about migration, including local communities, to have a sense of the real life experiences of vulnerable communities, but also shaping policy, advocating for change and enhanced integration mechanism to enable stakeholders in low and middle income countries to construct comprehensive approaches to address the challenges of displacement. In terms of advocacy, the findings empowers and are aimed to empower the communities who have so far been marginalized to improve their visibility, and that's also achieved through participatory methods, and also to enhance a reach to a wider audience for them. We have direct routes to policy. We work closely with the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, and they work on building an evidence based on the protection of people affected by conflict, which is a kind of specific route to policy in that regard. But this work does not come without challenges. And today I'm really privileged to be here, to be able to discuss the important work that my vibrant and eclectic team has been accomplishing, including the brilliant slides, which I could have not put together despite my love for style. I cannot take this for granted, and not all the members of the MADAR team could easily make it to Kiel University, or ever, to deliver a presentation, to take part in the discussions and the exchanges about research with other colleagues, and to enjoy career-enhancing opportunities. The work of our network takes place in really complex regimes of mobility. What this means is some people have different rights to cross borders, and we have some burgundy passports. So for us, well, in Britain now no longer, they are black actually, or dark blue, but they allow to traverse borders more easily. And this is not just the EU. I'm talking about the Maghreb, between the Maghreb countries. This is something that we have to navigate to work together. Researchers and practitioners working in MADAR also have to tread very carefully. So I've made a list of the challenges. And the first one is working in zones of conflict. There are tensions between Maghreb countries concerning displacement and protection, conflict over sovereignty in the Western Sahara, partially controlled by Morocco, and these are the heart of diplomatic frictions in the wider region. Since the end of French colonial rule, the border between Algeria and Morocco has been contested, including an armed conflict and 40,000 Moroccan, an expulsion of 40,000 Moroccans from Algeria, and the border has been closed for 30 years. There is an order, an imposition where Moroccan academics cannot work with Algerian academics, and they can't travel. So next week we have a meeting all together, but our Algeria colleague cannot be there. The field sites, and you've got a sense of those field sites I've shown. Conducting research on migration and displacement is always a challenge, even here in Europe, because it's a controversial subject. It is more so when you work in very unstable, very volatile geographical context. It's difficult and dangerous. Only recently, that was February, the Tunisian president made statements about combating irregular migration, and now we have challenges and political reprisal in Tunisia. They have increased more and more with a crackdown on civil society and all activity relating to rights and to rights of migrants. And that affects not only our research participants, but our own team. So we had to move a team meeting we had in Tunisia, we had to move it to Morocco because it wasn't safe. A more conceptual sort of challenge, and is one that we have called compromise and complicity. We ask ourselves how we can build equitable partnership when there are structural inequalities among partners in the global north and the global south. How do we overcome such asymmetrical hierarchies and unequal power relations? These are the most pressing and uncomfortable questions that have been around, been discussed in our teams, and also relates to our funding. We're funded by the GCRF. That is essentially UK government aid money. That's the aid budget. It's bound up with development and its uncomfortable histories. An enduring legacy of colonialism that sits there, which in fact is meant to actually fund our research project. What compromise and complicities have we made and remade in our attempts to engage ethically? I don't quite have an answer for this, but almost. But in fact, we're writing a paper on this, and that's also under revision. So watch this space for compromise and complicity. On a serious note, the MADAR team has navigated such challenges over the years, and we have a very robust risk protocol, which has guided our responses to this challenged and increased risks. We have a safeguarding. Safeguarding for us is priority for the team and also for our research participants. But the research that we carry out has been critical of many of the governments, including the UK government and the important actors in the Maghreb. We stress the shortcomings in provision of the services, but also the infringement of rights, of human rights. And this comes with consequences. So today I want to acknowledge an empty chair in the room. A discursive empty chair. One of our partners, a large, I'd say major international organization that was part of the founding, the gestation of MADAR, in fact, had to withdraw from the network altogether for fear that its participation in MADAR, its involvement in MADAR, would endanger their ability to deliver life-saving services to vulnerable migrants in Algeria because of government pressures. I'm not going to name it. So, to conclude more positively, we acknowledge this empty chair and the many other empty chairs and empty spaces where people can't be here and should be here. And I want to embrace what lies ahead for MADAR and for research. In less than a week, our team will meet in the Maghreb. Alas, not all of us. But we will be welcoming new partners to the MADAR network, new project teams who have been awarded funds by MADAR to undertake exciting and challenging research across the Maghreb. We've reached an exciting stage with multiple projects ongoing, some about to begin, and we thus continue to generate new data, more evidence, to foster and build capacity across the region, and to nurture new international collaborations. I want to thank you for your time, for your interest and patience, and I look forward to your questions, but also future opportunity to share and discuss MADAR's research finding. Here's a QR code about our social media handles and our website. Thank you.
Well, obviously it'll be an opportunity to thank Mariangela fulsomely for what is a profound lecture. After you, as the audience, have had an opportunity to ask some questions, and Mariangela has very generously offered to answer any questions that come through from you here, but also any colleagues or visitors who are online. So can I just ask if there is anybody who wants to kick off with a question, please? We have some microphones coming around. Jane.
Thank you so much, Mariangela. A fascinating and a very profound lecture. I'm just thinking about the data and how it's informing the kind of structures that you're in, because it's very clear that your focus is on lived experience and you're collating that data at the ground. And then I'm thinking about how it fits into the structures. So you mentioned the Sustainable Development Goal right at the beginning, and then the human rights framework, sort of particularly thinking about the roles of special rapporteurs. So I was just wondering what your relationship is with those structures in terms of informing the international discourse, because the work that you do is so pivotal in raising the voices of those with lived experience.
Thank you, Jane. Can I answer? That's a really good question. MADAR is designed in a way that we'll have about a year after having gathered data and after the project come to an end, and that year is in fact just for dissemination, meaning engagement with different actors. So we have already a plan for actors at national level, at regional level, but also international level, to kind of press on with policies. So each of the research projects has not only academic findings, but all policy briefs written usually in Arabic, English, and French. And so we will devote the final year of MADAR for that specific process of policy shaping, because it's also how MADAR was conceived by the founders. So even if I didn't want to do that, I couldn't escape it. But absolutely, that's really, really important. And it's something that I will have to learn from my NGO colleagues that have done this for long. Is also a challenge precisely because of where the Maghreb is placed. So try also bring Europe into the discussions, because ultimately it affects Europe and what they do. In terms of rights, that's more difficult. As you know, as a law scholar, you know really well that when it comes to international framework for rights, you turn around and you say, well, it doesn't really apply to us, and it doesn't apply to us. So, but there's a long way ahead, but thank you for that. I'm hoping that that final year will actually bear its fruits. Thank you.
I think there is a question coming through, perhaps from online, from Tim Lustig.
Yeah, thank you very much, David, and thank you, Mariangela. It was absolutely fantastic and a really good talk. Thank you very much, and very interdisciplinary as well. I've got two questions, if I may, relatively brief from the online audience. And the first one is from our colleague Miroslav Spasov. He says, this is a unique and so important research project. What are the anticipated deliverables or findings, and what's the expected long-term impact the project will make? And then secondly, from another colleague in the faculty, Kate Cushing, thank you for an amazing lecture on MADAR. Data is clearly vital for policy change and real change for the lives of these migrants. How might MADAR begin to affect a cultural and ideological awareness of the reality of those people amongst the populations in the countries to which these migrants hope to reach, aka the empty chairs? Thank you.
Thanks, Tim, for facilitating that, and thanks to Miro and Kate for really insightful questions. I'll answer Miro first. The deliverables are many. You have documentaries, exhibitions, performances, academic articles ranging from health into anthropology, sociology. We have findings, deliverables like policy briefs, so it's really, really wide across the different projects and different teams. The findings, this was a snapshot, and some of them, the findings for Tunisia, for instance, we had to hold off field work because of what's happening. But the findings are of different natures. They look at there are creative approaches, so they're engaging with participants with creative methods, but it's also really quantitative stuff from demographers and other scholars who use quant. In terms of the impact, I've given a sense of the possible impacts. The first thing we want to do is to work initially at local level, so in the different countries we operate, and try to shape policy locally, protection policy locally, but then an international level. And what are the international instruments, and how can we shape policy at international level to make sure that there is in fact protection, protection measures regionally. An acknowledgement also that we need to engage with the Maghreb as a region. Kate, your question is, of course, I didn't expect less of you. It's challenging. I don't have an answer for that. I don't have an answer for that because I'm still quite trying to figure out, myself, of course, and the team, of how many empty chairs are there, how many other chairs we need to go and reach out to. But one of the things I'm sure about is the diversity of deliverables. The use of documentaries, the use of films or performances is very, very effective to engage not only with the populations in Europe, so the Boza, the destination of the El Dorado, but in fact and mainly with the populations in the Maghreb, where there is high level of illiteracy, but also where there's different ways in which migration is represented. And that kind of work is more effective in shifting the narrative, but also in giving an insights into the lived experiences. Thank you.
We have time probably for, yes, please.
Thanks, Mariangela. I think my question is really specific that you mentioned within the presentation about harm. And one of the things that I find interesting, particularly when there's references to human trafficking, is that there's potential harms caused by laws and policies that are aimed to eradicate human trafficking. But one of the things I wanted to ask about was harm, and how are you classifying that harm? Is it harms perpetrated by individuals, or is it organisations or governmental actors? Where's this harm being, who's doing the harm, if that makes sense?
Really good question. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. So harm in this case is multi-layered. We have harm because there are lack of protection measures. Take the case of Algeria, and that already constitutes and represent and facilitate harm. We have harm that happens on the journey, so harm by traffickers, but also those who are allegedly enabling the journeys, which are long and tortuous. We also have harm caused by harm derived from host and guest populations, migrant populations, because of heightened racism. And that harm is systemic, is persistent, is often bodily and violent, but also it's in the everyday. So there are different levels of harms. There are also many more ramifications to this kind of three strands, but this is how I would classify that. Yeah. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mariangela. I think we probably have time for one more question, if there is one. Can I abuse chair's privilege then and just ask you a question? And just to ask you about, there's a phrase that funders use. They want us to scale up, and they use that frequently. And you have here in MADAR a project which has the kind of geographical scale, which, as you say, is unique. And you're dealing with numbers, as you were talking about with the migrant women who you've interviewed, and they're hard to reach people. So what are the challenges of literally scaling up with a project like this? Because you are doing it, but I'm sure it brings challenges in terms of data management, but also that kind of management of the lived experience that you are sharing to create the impact.
Thank you, David. This relates somewhat to Jane's questions earlier on. What do we do after? How do you scale up? And it's difficult because we're working at a regional level. But Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia represent the central Maghreb. So the scaling up, the next stage will be the MENA region. Because, of course, there are so many confluences, geographical, but also in terms of provisions and displacement patterns affecting Libya as well. But also creating some kind of approach to transforming data into the next stage that can be actually effective to policymakers. What kind of policymakers are we talking about here? And this is one of the challenges of MADAR. But also, in terms of scaling up, when you talk about data management, there is a sense that sometimes we either navigate with big data and then we really need to go down to the small qualitative stuff to really make sense of the big number. And I think in MADAR, we do the opposite that you do with other projects. You start small and you go big, whereas instead we have these big data sets. And to make sense of them, actually, is those voices and lived experiences, those dances, those performances, the films like Boza that help us navigate the big data sets and make sense of them. So there's a sort of interesting, somewhat synergy between the two. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. It answers it brilliantly. And it kind of, coming from literary studies, it's almost like you've done a move from distant reading to close
Close
reading,
reading,
which
precisely.
I love. You know, I think that's fantastic. Just want to finish by saying just a few words. Obviously, and I'm going to invite you all in a moment to express your thanks to Mariangela. I want to thank Mariangela for an absolutely brilliant, profound, unsettling, but important lecture. We always say that participatory research is good, and it is. There's no doubt about that. But as Mariangela's image of the empty chair indicated, participatory research can bring risks as well. It depends where you do it and how you do it and what you're researching. So it's really important, I think, to be reminded of that. And it's also really important, I think, to be reminded of what's at stake in this project, because it is generating its data, it's generating its findings through representations, through interrogating closely the language that people use about their conditions, their situations. And it is, in short, a profound and important statement of the importance of humanistic scholarship to our world. Because this is an interdisciplinary project, there's no doubt about this, but as its base, it has linguistic intelligence, it has linguistic understanding, and it has a deep sense of how representations work in the world. So I want to thank Mariangela for reminding us of that fact and reminding us of just how important this is going to be to policymakers as they address the global challenges that we're all part of. So can I invite you to thank Mariangela for her lecture. And our thanks to Alice. Okay, just a few words before we finish off. Thanks also to those who've helped for the smooth running of this event, particularly to Steve Kilner, and also to Professor Tim Lustig, the director of ILAS, and also all those from the Kiel Conferencing and Events Directorate and also the AVS team who've been with us tonight. And of course, thank you to you, the audience, for your support and contributions to the Global Challenges lectures, as ever, some great questions, and also thanks to all of those who were able to join us online. Just a couple of announcements for your diary. Our next Global Challenge lecture will be by Professor Martin Wilkinson, Professor of Politics and International Relations at the University of Auckland. Public health and the nanny state is the topic that he's going to be speaking about. And for any of us who are involved at the moment in thinking about public health, that is going to be something to really engage with. It's another of our hybrid events taking place on Wednesday, the 21st of June at 6 p.m. in this room, the Salvin Room, and also available online via Microsoft Teams. Full details of how to register on the ILAS website. ILAS have made great progress with their exciting programme of speakers for 2023-24. You would have seen them. I think they're back again to remind you. And a preview is there on the screen. All the details, including how to register, will be on the ILAS website as well. So thank you again very much for coming. Thank you.